Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Crane. I'm town manager, and I'm here to be a sort of moderator here for the discussion for this second community forum for White Ponds. Kate, I don't know if you want to just go ahead and share the screen now and put the presentation up. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started is the meeting is being recorded and will be available for review on Minuteman Media Network. I'm not sure when, but at some point in time in the near future. We're on. Kate, we're on. Do you want to go back to the top?
Yeah. Sorry.
So one of the things we'd ask is, reverse sneak peek. We'd ask that attendees mute your microphones and turn off your video as we go through the presentation. And we won't be using the chat feature here tonight. When we get to we're going to get through the presentations. And so I'd ask you to hold questions until we get to the end and then use the raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen. Hopefully everybody knows how to do that. If not, you can just unmute and ask to be recognized. But we think there'll be a lot of questions. So the raise hand feature will help us keep on track and make sure we can get through the questions as quickly as possible. I would ask that, and once you raise your hand and are acknowledged, you're free to unmute and turn your video back on so we can see you when you ask your question. I would also ask that if you enter your name in on your Zoom display, so we know who you are when you're asking, and if you're calling, and identify yourself anyway, but especially if you're calling in, identify yourself because all we can see is a phone number. And then just a final thing, because I think we want to get the information out to the community as quickly and clearly as possible. We do have a winter event that's bearing down on us. I would just ask that any questions or comments really be related to new information, so we don't have redundancy in some of the points that are either made or asked about. But we want to make sure that we do as complete a presentation and discussion and give you complete answers. But we want to make sure that we're not rehashing the same issues over and over. So with that, I'll just run through the agenda here quickly. So again, I'm Stephen Crane. The project team is Kate Hodges, the Deputy Town Manager, Ryan Kane, our Recreation Director, Ryan Orr, our Facilities Director. We also have Delia Kay, our Natural Resources Director, and Aaron McCloskey, our Highway and Ground Superintendent, and Alan Cathcart, our Public Works Director. And then our engineering design firm from Weston Sampson is Gene Bollinger, who's Vice President, and Brandon Kunkel, who's the landscape architect. They are it's a very dynamic team, and I'm excited to hear the presentation. I hope you are as well. So with that, I'm going to mute myself and turn off, the agenda, sorry. We're gonna go back to that. So we're gonna go through this quickly. The project goals, the updated discussion image, entrance and drive hillside access, reforestation efforts, review of hillside alternatives, stormwater review and improvements, natural resources information, Lower Hillside Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and E911 parking and access, emergency access, budget and funding strategy, a 2020 operational overview in October, the results from a community survey that was done October, November, and then we'll get to questions. And I think if I would just give one sneak preview, one of the things that I think is the strength of the presentation that you'll see if you have participated in other White Pond discussions is that the team that I just introduced has really done a great job of hearing you, listening to your comments, and trying to incorporate that feedback into the design. And I think that that feedback and those changes will really stand out in the presentation tonight. So I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to Kate.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Kate Hodges. I'm the Deputy Town Manager. Essentially, we just want to go through the project goals. So to review what has likely been overstated, depending on who folks have spoken to, the town remains steadfast in our goals for this project. And the primary focus for this phase surrounds what is legally necessary and required for access improvements to the property overall, and of equal importance are our plans and efforts related to stormwater management and erosion control. So you can see the more specific goals outlined on this slide, which relate back basically to the main notion above, which is to improve the property in a manner which is compliant with both state and federal guidelines and representative of the community's wishes. So that said, we thought it best to begin this evening's meeting with an updated discussion image. I realize that many members of the community felt anxious about some of the elements of the former schematic and discussion images that were circulating. And we want people to know that we've listened and we've heard you, and we're planning accordingly. Some of the elements of the former schematic were problematic and really not met with a great amount of community excitement. And so we have since taken those out. So we're listening, again, feedback and suggestions. You can see here that the picnic groves and the pavilion, which were once depicted at the top of the plan, have since been removed. Unfortunately, these areas consisted mostly of stone dust and mulch that would have been created from on-site chipping. So their elimination didn't necessarily yield a great deal of savings. However, whatever was the estimated savings, which we thought might be anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000, we've reallocated into a larger reforestation effort, and that will be discussed a bit later. Right now, we're very much in the infancy stages, looking to gather more feedback and understanding. So I am going to turn it over to Gene Bollinger right now, where he's going to talk about some of the accessibility.
Okay, great. Kate, thanks very much. Good to be here again. And I think just building off of what Stephen and Kate have already shared, we're going to be continuing to listen. So we will be anxious to hear people's perspective once we conclude the presentation. So if you go to the next slide, Kate, and I'm going to cover right now really the upper portion of the property. This is a view looking back to the entrance. And one of the things you'll take note, and I think everybody's aware, is that the entrance is extremely narrow. So there is a tree removal that's required in this image, sort of center right on the drive as we're looking out of the property. But again, we're really looking to limit the amount of tree removals. The entrance drive is really substandard, and we have to bring it up to a minimum criteria, and we're looking to get to about a 20-foot width here from something that's significantly lower than that. So it requires about a 4-foot expansion of the drive, and there is a twin trunk tree that would be removed under that scenario. Next slide. And this is one of the nice things of the project, is that we've inherited a parking area that's really in pretty good condition. It's well marked out, it's well organized. The pavement is in good condition. So it may be that we look to modify the parking stall configuration by just a little bit in the far distance in this image, but we're not looking at expending a significant amount of money in the upper parking area. Next image. And of course, this is the major move, the access from the hillside down to the beachfront. This is the existing staircase. This is an image that's looking kind of perpendicular to that staircase. And it gives you a sense that the existing vegetation out there, it's quite varied. It's in good condition to poor condition. It's of various caliber. You'll notice there are very few lower limbs, and there's not a lot of understory in the area that we're proposing the improvement. And we'll be showing a plan of where the new staircase is located and aligned, and also where the handicapped accessible ramp is located. Next image, Kate. And then of course, when you get to the bottom, you've got to complete the journey, and you've got to get to the edge of the water. So the town has already established some protocols which we'll be looking to retain and enhance. So we're looking to make a trip from the parking area to the water's edge, fully compliant, fully accessible, fully inclusive. And just a reminder that we're talking about accommodating folks with physical challenges, but we're also talking about accommodating multiple other needs. If you're pushing a stroller, if you're pulling a wagon, stairs are not really an option. And the handicapped accessible pathway gives much opportunity for people to traverse the slope down to the beachfront. Next slide, Kate. And then just graphically depicting what Kate talked about just a moment ago. So you'll see in plan view that there are actually very few callouts up here now because we've simplified the plan significantly. The pavilion is gone. The picnic area adjacent to the pavilion is gone. The little picnic pods that appeared on the left side of the image last time we presented the plan, those are gone as well. It was actually a secondary, not accessible, but a secondary pathway that meandered from about a point across from the stormwater infiltration basin all the way down to the beachfront. It was just another option, another alternative as far as making your way down to the beachfront. We've eliminated that as well. So the plan is the physical representation of a much, much simplified approach. And this has been in direct response to the comments that we've been hearing from folks. Next slide, Kate. I think I'm passing the baton.
All right, I think it's
to Ryan Orr.
My name is Ryan Orr. I'm facilities director for the town. I think it's my turn. All right, so I'm here to talk about the inclined elevator that has been brought up as a possible alternative to the switchback walkway. So there's a number of things to consider. We have first here, one of the points is, the power that it's going to require to run this. There's a number of things to consider when thinking of that. It's, where is the power coming from? So here it shows 480, but I actually talked to Marine Innovations today, which is a company that installs these systems. And they actually said they could do it with a 240. They would need anywhere from an 80 to 100 amp service brought in, and it would have to be brought into the top of the hill. So not likely that we're going to be running it from our existing panel that's at the bottom of the hill. So we'd probably be bringing it in from the street as a separate service. So we'd have a separate bill to the town for that. And one of the things that would be discussed is, are we going to be bringing in an overhead or underground? Well, most likely we bring it in underground because it's best protocol. There's I'm trying to find my notes here. There's a bylaw in town that basically they're trying to move everything to underground. So I've been told that that's probably the best practice is to bring it in underground. So that's some trenching that we're going to need to do in order to get the power to that level, even though it's on the upper side of the hill. So those are some of the challenges we have with getting power there and what the power is. Requires a dedicated phone line. That again, we'd probably want to bring in underground so we don't have the overhead wires coming in. And if we're going to trench, we can bring that in for that as well. We'll need emergency planning in order to do this for the fire department and police department, as well as technicians to work on this equipment. So I'm going to bring you into another point right now where this the lift itself is going to be required to have a fence on both sides of it. Which is within 2 feet of the actual car on each side so that you can get a technician or emergency personnel up or down the slope without actually having to be riding in the car. So that widens what we need, which actually makes it a minimum of 9 feet of pathway that we'll need in order to put this lift in. overall infrastructure, and I mean, that's part of it. I mean, that's so problematic, and that's some of the problems that we're having with that is, you know, what it's going to take, the width of that in order, what we're going to need to take out for trees to get that in. On top of that, we also have an 8x10 by 48 inch or by 84 inch tall equipment shed that will also be placed at the top of the hill that we'll need to put a concrete slab down for that, that will, you know, house all the, you know, the motors and the service that comes in to supply the motors with power. So just going through the list here, imposing the landscape, I think we touched on that. Exposed moving parts, that's one of the reasons why commercial, when you use this commercially, you are required to have a fence on both sides of it because of the moving parts. The actual car itself needs to be fully enclosed with a roof. It is perforated so that you can see through it, but they want to make sure that you can't get your hands out. You can't touch any of the moving parts. That's also a requirement for commercial. I think if you were to look it up online, you might find it without the rooftop and without the tall walls. But that is not for commercial use that you're seeing. We do expect that equipment like this will be, you know, I mean, we're going to see some vandalism. We're gonna have kids riding on it, like trying to slide down the rails in the middle of the winter with ice on it. We do foresee some issues with it being problematic, with vandalism and like I said, it becoming a ride for kids on the off seasons when there's no one there to monitor it and pay attention to it. There is a service contract that will be required. It's annually. You need to have this maintained twice a year. So we'd be looking between $3,500 and $5,000 a year just in maintenance alone. And I also think on top of all this, we are going to need to pay someone to actually monitor this when in use. So they're either going to be at the top of the hill or at the bottom of the hill in case someone were to get stuck on it. Someone didn't know how to use it. Also to make sure that kids aren't playing on it. So I think we will need to employ another someone else in our personnel just to make sure that they're monitoring this full time. Let me see if in my notes I have anything else really quick. I think we pretty much touched on everything. So I think I'm going to go ahead at this point and pass this along to Brandon Kunkel.
Great, and I'll be speaking to the stormwater here and then the overall approach and some of the analysis of the existing stormwater infrastructure that's on site right now. So we did review, the town provided us with record drawings and calculations for the existing infiltration system that's on site now. And if, you know, those drawings represent exactly what was put in the ground, and we believe they do. The storage capacity of the existing systems about 460 cubic feet. What's that equivalent to is about a 1/2 inch to a 5/8 inch rainfall event. And that really is only for collecting the area of the roadway only. It doesn't take into the surrounding runoff from the hillsides, other paved areas, the overall park property itself. The proposed system is a much larger system at a size of 13,000 cubic feet. Now this seems really aggressive, and the reason is that we're capturing up to the 100-year storm event within this system. So a 2-year, 10-year, 25-year, all the way up to a 100-year storm event, which is unfortunately becoming a little bit more and more common. The storm events are becoming more and more torrential versus a natural, easygoing rainfall. They become more violent, I guess is a better way to put it. But you get more rainfall in the shorter period of time. And that's due to climate change. And so that's something we're designing for. This system also is addressing not only the water quality, but the peak flow discharge. The current system, we believe, is really only designed for water quality, and it's doing a great job at it. It's just, if we were to look at the site holistically, it represents about 3% of the total capacity of the proposed system that we would like to put into place. So it's a much more robust system. We believe that, you know, it meets the stormwater guidelines for the town and the state. We'll be, when we do get in front of the local Concom, you know, and you folks, and Delia, you'll speak to that in just a minute as I hand it off to you. You know, we'll be working hand in hand with them. So this is not the end. This is just conceptually where we're at this point in time with the stormwater design. I'm not sure who's speaking to this one, honestly.
Hi, everyone. Delia Kay, Natural Resources Director for the town, and I'm glad to be here and glad to see so many people here on the call. I just wanted to give a very brief overview of the permitting process that this project will go through. Many of you know this process. You've been involved in your own projects or seen other projects. Under the State Wetlands Protection Act and the Concord Wetlands Bylaw, the Natural Resources Commission has jurisdiction over any projects that are within 100 feet of wetlands, 200 feet of perennial streams within the floodplain, and under the bylaw within 100 feet of certified vernal pools. What we're looking at here is a project that is within 100 feet of wetlands, the shore of White Pond. And I have this photograph up just to demonstrate that, you know, even projects that the Natural Resources Division puts forward, this is the slope restoration project. We had to go through this same process with the notice of intent review. What the notice of intent looks at is any work that is occurring within these jurisdictional resource areas. There's a butter notification, so anybody within 100 feet of the boundary of any property line that is under work contemplated under a filing would be notified directly. There are other ways for the public to be notified. We post our agendas, but you can also receive those news and notices if you sign up on the town website. So there are ways of getting, you know, informed about what's going on with the NRC and their project reviews. Projects go through a public hearing process, which is a robust and transparent process of reviewing every application that comes in. And whether or not it's a town project or a private project, everything is evaluated, and they're evaluated under a standard of avoiding, minimizing, and mitigating project impacts. So when this project is finalized, after there's public input through these public hearings, Kate and her team will file a notice of intent with the NRC. It will come in front of the NRC, and the commission will evaluate that. And the public has an opportunity to comment and ask questions and make suggestions, which makes that project a better project. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, both, you know, for the town and in the private sector. And the value of public input is to make any project a better project. And that I will also say is, you know, a value of, you know, these public hearings that are being held before it even gets to the permitting process. Brendan spoke about the stormwater management. That's also a component that is reviewed by the NRC. Any projects that has to go through a stormwater management review, we defer to our experts in the engineering division. We have very good engineers in the town of Concord that will review the stormwater management report, the calculations that are submitted for compliance with state and federal regulations. I will point out, as everybody knows, I mean, White Pond is a treasure. It's a great pond. It has no inlets or outlets. It is just, you know, a pond that is solely reliant upon surface water and its position in the groundwater. So because it has no inlets or outlets, any inputs coming into it, if they are contaminated, are going to really affect this pond. And David Bierg, I think, you know, recognized this decades ago and worked with the White Pond Associates to implement some stormwater management features at that time in the 90s. And, you know, anybody who is a fan of the pond and its water quality and, you know, its beauty should be grateful to David Bierg and the efforts that he and all the, you know, people that he marshaled to get these improvements implemented. As Brendan said, they're not up to the standards that we would want to see now with climate change and the stormwater management standards that are under the Wetlands Protection Act and the town standards. So we are looking to bring those into, you know, this, you know, 21st century review, and anything that we can do to improve that is going to improve the water quality of the pond. So I'm very glad to see, as part of this project, that there is this component of the stormwater management, which will be reviewed by Public Works just to make sure it meets the standards. And as I said, the Natural Resources Commission will look at the project for the efforts that it has made to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts. It is generally, for a project of this size, it's going to be more than one hearing, but I'm hopeful that working through this public process that we're getting to, you know, a really good point of having something come in front of the commission that is something that is, you know, a benefit to the environment as well as to Concord residents. And Kate, I think with that, I'm going to turn that over to you.
Great, thank you. So another important aspect of the program and of the project has involved a robust reforestation effort. And I am not entirely sure how or why this fact may have been missed. And I think that we were remiss in perhaps not discussing it in as much depth as we should have in the first hearing. But our plans and proposals from the town side have always included the idea and a goal of replanting more than what is necessary or obliged ratio wise. And so this image that you see here on the left shows the hillside specific plan, which calls for the removal of 17 trees. Those are represented by the red dots, and the replacement of those in the green dots. And most, for the record, are, you know, really failing trees. They're either dead or dying. And as Jean had mentioned earlier in the presentation, really don't have a lot of limbs on the ground or lower to the ground rather, because there's just, it's so light starved in that area. And so we want to be able to, you know, replace with, you know, in this area, at least more than 80 native species of varying caliber and height as our budget will allow. And we also want to do a reforestation effort of the floor, of the forest floor, essentially with some native grasses and woody shrubs. So for the overall property for removals and reforestation, there's 21 trees that need to be removed, a mixture of oaks, maples, ash, and pines, and most are, as I said, in dead or in relatively poor condition. And specifics as to why, 4 in the access drive, which Jean spoke about earlier, 6 within the ramp or the ADA pathway, 7 with the connections from the bathroom and the beach, which is Gene will call upon him later to talk about that. 3 for the ADA and E911 parking that's down at the bottom of the ramp by the boat launch. And then 1 that is dead, that's in the heavily used public actual beach area that needs to be removed for a number of safety concerns. And so what we're planning on doing is replacing at a ratio of 4-to-1. So the NRC regulations for the NOI require that we replace at a 1-to-1 ratio. So for every 1 tree or shrub that we remove, we replace it with 1. And we're looking to increase that by at least 400%. And by that way, planting between 80 and 90 new trees or shrubs, what have you, for the entire property. And so we're planting and then cultivating those trees and a robust understory. And we're also looking to remove invasives from the property for the overall plant health. Comments have been received also since our last meeting, specifically asking or mentioning the need about specific species and plants and surveys and whatnot that were done on the hillside. And so I wanted to address that by saying that Weston and Sampson completed a full survey, including identifying all of the trees that have larger than a 10-inch caliber some number of months ago, and we have those plans. And additionally, as required by state statute, which Delia talked about when she was talking about her slide, the State Division of Fishery and Wildlife has the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. And so that program has a rare wildlife species section within it in the Mass Wetlands Protection Acts, which have the regulations that require approval for any improvements made to properties which are known to have state listed endangered species. And so that is true of White Pond in the beach area. So those surveys were conducted in the early summer. And the town received the determination in August that the Mass Wildlife stated that while the project does occur within the actual habitat of 2 state listed threatened plants, quote, the division has determined that the project as currently proposed will not adversely affect the actual resource habitat areas. And so now that we have that initial designation, we can move on to do a full botanical survey for the 2 particular species that are called out. And so that will be, happening probably in tandem with our NOI submission. So I'm going to hand it back over to Gene so he can talk about the lower parking area.
Hey, thanks very much. We talked about this a little bit at the last meeting, and it's a very tricky area. There's a lot going on in a relatively small geographic footprint. And in a sense, none of it is terribly conducive to being ADA friendly. And in fact, even though there are some spaces that are marked out with the handicapped accessible symbol in the parking stalls, I can assure you that there's nothing accessible about those actual parking stalls, the way they're currently configured and the gradient that's exhibited and the relationship between the drive, the parking spaces, and then the beachfront. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we're trying to do it in a way that's very sensitive by limiting the amount of additional pavement that has to be added, by limiting the amount of heavy infrastructure, meaning retaining walls, and ramping systems and railing systems that have to be introduced. And yet we've got this responsibility to allow people to gain access to this location and to get from a vehicle safely out of their vehicle, across the beachfront, to the restroom, to the decking area, to the waterfront. And as a result, we put a lot of time and effort to coming up with the plan that's been presented to you last time and then refined a fair bit this time. So under the current scenario, we're able to get 2 handicapped parking spaces and a couple of additional spaces that support maintenance and emergency access at this lower level. And another complication is we've got to honor this connection to the boat launch. That is an easement to the DCR. And therefore, you've got to sort of have a seamless relationship between the pavement that is going to represent the handicapped accessible spaces shown in the image and the emergency access and service spaces and the corridor that's in the left side of this image that leads down to the boat launch. So I say seamless, meaning there can't be any retaining walls that allow you to adjust your approach to grading. But at the end, there will be a series of terraces, there'll be a series of leveling to create slopes that are less than 5% that permit the access that's desired. Next slide, please, Kate. You know, the restroom facility, we'd like to make it appear more permanent. We'd like to make it fully inclusive, meaning that regardless of what restroom you're going into, you're sort of arriving within the same area. And that means establishing some decking that encapsulates this restroom building. The ramp would be eliminated in the right. So whether you're in a wheelchair, whether you need a handicapped accessible route or not, you'll arrive at one of these doorways in the exact same fashion, which in our mind is the right and proper thing to do to create the same sort of experience for everybody. Next slide, please, Kate. I think I'm handing it back to you now for a quick run over on the budget.
Yes. So the current budget for this project is still being finalized, but we are now projecting the total to be anywhere between $1.35 and $1.5 million. We currently have $850,000 in funding that's been secured both via the CPC allocation in fiscal year 20 and this current year, fiscal 21's capital plan. We have an application pending for $300,000 for CPC for FY22 and a plan to request the remainder in the FY22 capital plan budget. Again, we are looking to, finalize, an idea for the project first, and then we would go from there to try to finalize a budget for that. I'm handing it over now to Ryan Kane.
Sure. Thank you, Kate. Ryan Kane, the Director of Recreation. Just got to start off with what a great asset the pond is and the beach is to the community. We were thrilled a couple of years ago when White Pond Associates thought about keeping it, the asset, as a resource to the community with the gift to the town. Concord Recreation, the BD Center in the town of Concord, it lines right up with our goals of providing great community recreation opportunities for our residents. So we were thrilled to see the gift come to the town, and we're thrilled at the opportunity to operate it. We've had 2 successful summers operating the facility, 2 very different summers operating the facility. In 2019, we had 740 households, family households that had memberships to the facility. This past year, we limited the number of family households to 520. We had some refunds and people back out, so we ended up with the 503 family memberships as we went through this past summer. We limited primarily because we were using a reservation system to be able to access the facility, and we realized that, to be able to get the members to be able to access the facility, we couldn't have the high numbers that we had originally. This past summer, we had on a daily basis 118 reservation spots available daily, and most days those spots were all taken up or reserved through our system for being able to get down and utilize the beach. So it was a good community asset this past summer, a good place for people to get out and have that opportunity to recreate when we'd been, closed up for quite some time prior to that. This past summer's member satisfaction survey, overall, people felt safe at the facility, and that's our primary goal there, is providing that safe recreation opportunity. Most families are using the facility between 5 to 10 times during the summer. And you can see most of the other stats there, just about what time periods people wanted and how we operated and how the quality of our staff were there. Kate, next slide, please. Also, just in some of the conversations that we've had here, and we were talking about stormwater runoff, I've had some conversations with Ann Boudreau, who's been the waterfront director down at the site previously with the White Pond Associates, and then with us for the past 2 years. So I kind of asked for her input as to how we've been going through with the stormwater management. And this was kind of a summary of what we had here. So she's Ann saying that being on site for the White Pond Summer Program, For the past 10 years, she's had a firsthand perspective on the challenge of managing stormwater that runs down the entire hillside, driveway to the steps. Even with multiple attempts to remedy the situation through the years, the stormwater seems to continuously be too powerful for the system in place. Any attempt at improvements, now I'm covering up my own screen here, would be a worthwhile effort, and she fears that the stormwater runoff continues, it will eventually wash out the entirety of the beach area and the stone wall. That's just, someone who's there on the site, seeing it on a regular basis, and is there through the storms and watching them come through. Next slide, please, Kate. This is the survey that you guys did with Erin, Kate.
Yep. So as most of you likely know, we conducted an online survey from October into early November. We basically gave that out. We sent out a postcard with that information and the information relative to the first public hearing to about 600 recipients. We also put it in news and notices on the town website and several social media posts. And through those efforts, we received about 300 response. And 94% of those people answered all of the questions, meaning that they didn't skip any. And there weren't too many. There was about 12 questions, and 2 were write-ins. So essentially, the questions that we posed, we wanted to know someone's relationship to the property, neighbors or users. And much of the data that we collected was pretty unsurprising. We had a healthy mix of both neighbors and beach users. It was nearly a 50-50 who took the survey. We received about, like I said, 300 individual responses. Summer use was the greatest, followed by fall use. Most users reported driving to the property, which was interesting. We thought we would have more folks saying that they either walked or biked, but predominantly more than 70% said that they drive to the property. And it was basically a 50-50 split down the middle on whether the people who took the survey thought that the parking that we have currently is adequate or not. The 2 write-in areas were the ones that were really of most interest to us. And it was a variety of things that we asked, but essentially boiled down to if there was any amenities that weren't seen in the plan that we should be thinking about, or that folks really, really want to have. And then we left something open to, is there any other information that you want to share? And so I'm not going to go through all of the individual responses for that. There was, well over 100 comments on each of those 2 fields. But what I can tell you is that there was 123 people who responded that they wanted a permanent bathroom facility, which was very interesting to us because we hadn't heard that prior to this. Clearly, you can see that that isn't in the plans right now. We have the restroom trailer and we're building around that, but it's like I said, it's a perspective that we hadn't heard before. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was many people asked for canoe and kayak rentals, and if we could have some type of boat storage or something that was there. So that's an interesting thing to think about programmatically, to put on, some side and really discuss that more. Other than that, people really talked about wanting to do, exactly what we're planning, which is to not over-program the area, to really, take care of the pond's health and the stormwater management. And several people remarked that it would be helpful if they had an easier way than the stairs for their small children, as many of them said that they use the property for swimming lessons and play dates.
Okay, that was really great. So maybe if you could stop sharing screen for a moment. And certainly if we have questions and people want to go back to a particular slide, we could certainly do that. But having everybody here helps me manage the Q&A. So again, there's the raise hand feature that is on the bottom of your screen. If you scroll over the bottom part of your screen, you'll see the mute, stop video, security, participants, share screen. Those items will pop up. And so on the participant side, there's a right arrow, or you can click on the participants button and raise your hand. So I see we have 2 hands raised. So the first hand I saw was for, is it Jeff Parker? So if you could unmute and turn on your video.
Hi, I'm the first one. That's incredible. Okay, I have some thoughts about this project. First of all, there's 240 citizens that signed a petition calling for a moratorium on this project until all concerned citizens have a chance to participate in this process and a consensus is reached. One of the things that is not clear about this project is that the ADA requirement does not need to be filled unless we change the stairs. If you don't change the stairs, nothing has to happen. Also, according to ADA requirements, a public entity does not have to take any action if they'll demonstrate to be a fundamental alteration to the nature of a program, or it has undue financial or administrative costs. Now, I think this whole ADA requirement thing is blown way out of proportion. This does not have to happen. The spots at the bottom are great. It's not busy at all. I'm a civil engineer. You could put spots at the bottom easily. Another problem I'm having is we're hearing a lot from people who are trying to sell us the project. These guys have a lot at stake in this project. They're going to make money. When they say it's too busy,
Hey,
no, they're working this project. Those
hey,
guys are working this project.
So, hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think, I appreciate what you're saying. I think I'd like to, if you have a question, you're certainly welcome to offer comments, but I think we'd like to hear from you about the content of the presentation and the planned improvements, not people's motivations.
Well, I think that has to do with the content. Okay. And the stormwater numbers he gave, I think they're a bit misleading because he did not count for infiltration. He said like it's going to be a storage tank down there, but it's not. It's sandy soil. It's going to infiltrate. Someone wrote me a letter just recently saying that the stormwater is working great now. It was plugged for years, but now it works great. I think with infiltration, that tank is fine. So
we understand you disagree with the engineer's conclusions.
Well, first of all, I don't think that was an engineer, but those numbers aren't right. It doesn't count for infiltration. When the water goes down in the storm, it infiltrates. It's not just being stored. So those numbers aren't right.
Excuse me, Stephen, Mr. Parker. We had a very robust plan that was done by a number of engineers. And I would be happy to send that to you if you would like to review it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
247 pages long. And
okay,
please allow me to finish, sir.
Yeah.
It shows 5 different types of soil samples in 5 different testing pits. Not all of them are sandy. And I just think that I would like you to at least review that before you make a determination on that.
Okay, I just had a letter from people saying it works fine now. I think
right. I think the presentation covered that. Is there anything else before we move on to the next raise?
Yeah, just the main thing is the current path is over 400 yards long from the top. That's not practical for handicapped people. They need parking at the bottom. That's all they need, and that's it. 400 yards is a long hike for someone who's handicapped.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I don't seem to have an orange hands up, but my name is Catherine, and when you're ready to call me, I'm ready to speak.
Okay, Carmen Jackier had her hand up first, so I will call on you after that. Carmen, can you unmute and turn on your video, please?
Hi, I'm with the White Pond Committee, and one part of my question was how long the ADA path is, and I just heard it's 400 yards long. Is that correct? That was from Mr. Jeff Parker.
Yeah, so That's 1,200 feet. We would have to, I actually don't know that length off the top of my head. It's the first time we've asked that. Would be very happy to share that information, but we'll have to scale it off the drawings and exchange.
Okay, I would like,
Carmen, to just point out though, that it isn't actually, we're not calling it just the ADA path. For a number of reasons, which we talked about in the presentation. It's an alternative pathway in order for people. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be someone in a wheelchair or someone with a severe impairment, but it allows people who, have some either temporary or permanent mobility issues, or persons who would prefer to use that type because they have a stroller or something wheeled. And I just thought, it's an interesting concept when you think about it. It isn't, too far, et cetera, because I myself just had my knee replaced not too long ago. And, I wouldn't be somebody that would necessarily park at the bottom with an ADA or a handicap placard. And yet, doing the stairs up and down, as I'm sure you can imagine, is probably the last thing that I'd want to do. So that was sort of the design impetus behind it, was sort of this universal concept.
thank you. And I did see it as it would be good for somebody with strollers or with young kids and bad knees and elderly. So if someone is ADA and they can't make that, there still is one parking place that will be below, or two handicap places below that will be there?
There are two. Yep.
Two. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thanks. Thank you, Carmen. So who was the person who said they didn't have the hands raised?
Well, I for one couldn't find the other gesture, so I'm doing it the old-fashioned five-finger wave.
All right, I see you. I see you.
Stephen, it was Catherine was the next one.
Yeah.
that-
Okay.
Yeah, I think most of us, I can't find a hand raising either. So it doesn't seem to be a feature for me.
So, interesting. Okay. Well, we'll try this the old-fashioned way then. So go ahead, Catherine. Can you please introduce yourself, turn your video on, and unmute?
Sure, I don't have a video. We're old fashioned here. We only have one in the house and my son's using it. But anyway, I also wanted to speak about the ADA concern and the university.
Catherine, could you introduce yourself first, please?
Sure, I thought I did. My name is Catherine Claremont, and I'm a neighbor in the White Pond community. Is that what you wanted to hear?
You need to give your address for the record, Catherine.
Oh, sure. Okay, it's 26 Hemlock Street in Concord, of course. Okay, so I just wanted to also comment about the ADA universal design. First of all, my understanding, if I remember the number right, it's either 3 or 4. The requirement here, I believe, is 3 handicap parking spots. So you have 2 designed at the bottom of the hill. If you had a third, it would meet ADA requirements. As someone who's lived here for many years and had 2 children while living in this neighborhood, managed the old steps, I can say, yes, it's a difficulty, but it's certainly manageable. And my guess would be, if you had the zigzag, it's not something I would like either. It's very long. It would be very long. And I don't really think that, it goes from one extreme to another. One is very steep, the other would be very long. I also, in knowing handicapped people and speaking to people in the community, who work for the handicapped, they felt that such a long, steep zigzag switchback, really wouldn't serve the purpose it was designed for, specifically for the handicapped. So I just really hope you evaluate that further. You speak to more people who have handicap needs, and in particular wheelchair needs, because I just don't think the design's practical in such a small area on a steep hill. And I don't know what you have done thus far to engage the, I forget, the Disability Commission. I understand there was a meeting that was canceled or, postponed or, needed to be delayed. And I do hope you engage that community, because personally, I'm not handicapped, but I'm just speaking to people who I know who are handicapped, and, people that work with the handicapped. And, I just think that because of the nature of the topography and the small area, I just worry about the balance between solving a problem and potentially, changing the nature of what White Pond looks like currently.
So I appreciate the comment. I just would offer that in this project, like many others, there are standards that you have to design to if you're going to make certain improvements. And so to some extent, the design ends up being a derivative of those standards. And when the intersection between those standards and the natural environment as it exists. I see Jean Goldsberry, who's the chair of our Disabilities Commission, and if you're going to respond to that, Jean, I'm happy to basically take you out of turn. So go ahead.
Thank you, Stephen. Jean Goldsberry, 1832 Main Street in Concord, and I am the chair of the Commission on Disabilities. The commission is very interested in this project. We had an early introduction to it a year and a half ago, maybe, Kate. We certainly are most interested in following it and ensuring that it meets ADA compliance, as well as that it's a welcoming kind of venue for people in the community. We had scheduled this on a meeting night that needed to be changed. Our next meeting is this Friday, the 18th at 5 p.m. and we'll be reviewing this quite thoroughly and providing input as the commission for the town of Concord. Thank you.
Hey, Jean, can I put you on a spot? You saw the presentation. Did anything leap off the page as off the charts or anything like that? I mean, I guess would you agree? Would you agree or disagree with my statement about design standards that kind of drive the form of things from time to time?
So I cannot speak on behalf of the commission because we haven't looked at it, but certainly the issue of making sure that there is universal design that works for everyone. And, to the point of there are many types of wheels that may need to access the area. Certainly wheelchairs are part of it, but many other kinds of devices as well, and as well as the strollers and the wagons and whatever else. So we really are, our charge as a commission is to ensure accessibility for people with disabilities, but we really are most concerned with the concept of universal design that can make this, again, welcoming for everyone.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
I think I see a few others. Well, the problem I have is and this is great, there's 65 participants. I can only see a few on my screen. To get onto my main screen, you have to turn your video on and maybe raise your hand. I see Andrea, I see you, but I think Kathy Power was actually next based on what we have. And if you've already spoken, please, you can click the lower hand button. So Kathy, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. I'm really happy to see this great presentation with new information in it. I'm happy to see evidence of having, really listened to some of the comments. I have a question about the privacy fence that for the record, Catherine Power, I live at 10 Shore Drive. I'm in a butter, and the planned picnic area would have been overlooking my backyard, and a 6-foot privacy fence that seems like a really horrible viewscape was part of the design. And I thought that was arising because of the picnic tables. Now the picnic area is gone. So why is there still a privacy fence in the plan?
I think that's a great question. And I think that's a matter of abutter preference, neighborhood preference. In reality, Kathy and others, we're actually not changing the way the site functions in that location. So it's really status quo, if you will. So if you think that the setback, the buffer, vegetative or otherwise, is satisfactory under current conditions, then we'd love to hear that. And it seems like that fence could go away.
Andrea, I know you've had your hand up for a while. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, so I'm Andrea Ciani, and I live at 57 Anson Road, Concord, and I'm speaking as a private citizen, even though not as my previous role, which was vice president of the White Pond Associates Board for 35 years or more. And so I do come with a lot of experience with the pond. And I think first, I really want to say thank you to those on the committee, because you really have come back showing how you listened. And I just can't say enough how I think how important that is, and how, and so the things I really heard and I agree with is the park-like pavilion. No one in my 30 years ever wanted more of a park. They really want the access to the beautiful natural gem in the woods. And so to remove that, I think is really great. I think that the hill hiker idea is very cool, but I know from our experience that we would have teenagers at night at 2 in the morning looking for something fun to do. And I can't think of something more fun than trying to get that working at 2 in the morning. So I agree with that not being a great idea. And I do know that over the years, we watched the stormwater, as Anne said very well, we watched it increase dramatically over our 30 years. And I think we need a very robust system, because I have a feeling it's only going to increase more. So I really appreciate that, because I do feel that that is the true protection of that water. So
Do more sauce or something to it? I put a little more.
So that we can swim, and which is what we and I know that what David did and many donated from White Pond area to that was great, but I think it needs to be much more robust now. I do worry about only 2 spots for handicapped. I thought those were out of the plan. I'm so happy to see them back in the plan, to be down at the bottom of the road. I did have a major disability for over 3 years, and I can't tell you how many times I depended on those spots below, would never have been able to serpentine down to the pond, would never have been able to go at all. So I think those spots are essential. But I also think I worry that 2 aren't enough, because I also, when I was handicapped, was turned away from many places I tried to go because the parking was taken. And I'm not sure 2 is enough. I think we had 3 there. I would just think hard about having enough for those that have a new knee replacement, a hip replacement, that really want to be able to enjoy the nature. To one question, I wondered if you could answer, what are the 2 species that you're protecting? And I know the serpentine path, we looked at it as part of the board, and I think change is really, really hard, but I think ultimately there's going to have to be some sort of path that allows all types to go down the hill. And I just know change is really hard. And so I think we'll probably have to accept some, and I really appreciate you listening to all of the people around the pond and stuff. And I also wonder about those bathrooms not being permanent.
Do you want me to answer the questions, Stephen?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Kate.
Sure. So the 2 species, I was afraid someone was going to ask this because it's going to be.
Was it lady slipper? Is that one?
Well,
I can answer that, Kate, if you want some assistance.
Engelmann's flax edge. Did I say it right?
Yep.
And Rasputinate bladderwort.
So the lady slipper is not a species that is protected?
The lady slippers that we have here in Concord are quite common in a localized fashion. So you will see in areas where they do well and they're picky, but they're quite common. So I can't remember which species, showy lady slipper, I don't remember which one they are, but there's a number of them around the pond. There's some around the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. They're in Estabrook Woods. They're at the town forest. They are common in a very specialized niche.
And one other comment I have is in the reforestation, which I appreciate so much that you're putting a lot into that, I would encourage you to think, if you're short of funds, to reach out to those. There are so many who care so much about that pond and that beachfront, that to reach out for donations for trees, to maybe have it reforested. When David did his project, you know, donations came in, and I think don't forget that, because I think there's a lot of people who care.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Steve,
and-
did you also want me to answer the question about the parking? That was beforehand.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Sure. So we're required to have 4 parking spots that are ADA accessible. And regardless of the number that we put down below, the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board has determined that we need to provide not equal, but similar access from top to bottom, since we have programming, and that by that we mean stairs top to bottom. And the existing stairs are not code compliant. And so it's an issue regardless of what we want to do to make things compliant for code or any ethical reasons. It's also becoming an insurance issue. So I just wanted to make sure that folks knew that. And the other addition down below, even though we could perhaps fit 4 ADA spots on the town side, that would leave no spots for emergency services. And when we were first going through a staff review, when we were receiving this generous gift and then determining how we were going to improve upon the property, one of the things that was brought up by both the fire chief and the assistant fire chief was that getting any type of stretcher apparatus down there, including you know, an ambulance or even an EMT, was extremely difficult, and a dedicated parking spot would be not only best practice, but something that they would insist upon. And so that was the impetus for you know, dedicating at least 1.5 spots, if not 2, to that.
So I think just to build on Kate's point before, Mr. Berg would be next. But before I do that, I just wanted to kind of make an overarching comment. Building on my comment about the design standards sometimes drive the form of the design. The other thing to remember is if it's private property, it's the same standards, but you have more choice in what you choose to do with your private property. When it is municipal property, our choices are very, very limited. We must comply with code. We must comply with environmental standards. And so when, you know, I think what's great about the donation is it will preserve White Pond and make it accessible for Concordians for a long time, and because the town will invest the resources needed to do that. But the exchange is there are standards and design choices that need to be made that may be different from when it was privately held. And that's really not something that we're doing just cause, it's something that we are obligated to do. So I kind of wanted to just put that out there just as a general statement. So, all right, Mr. Berg, did I say that right?
Thank you. I just wanted to.
Well, introduce yourself.
Okay,
and then
my name
I
is
can hear your
David
name.
Berg. I live at 20 Darton Street. And it was over 30 years ago that, as chairman of the White Pond Advisory Committee, I merely orchestrated an effort among this great community, and they're very talented musicians, for lack of a better word. And it was interesting, that was designed just for the road, and it's gratifying to see so much, a much bigger system is going in the future. But I did want to raise one concern about the low slope accessibility path. If you go half a mile away and examine what's happening at the low slope ramp connecting Powder Mill with the rail trail, there's a serpentine path, and there was so many people cutting across that they've created erosion that they had to go and put in a fence. So my suggestion, and maybe this isn't necessary, when the landscape plan is coming up, to put the vegetative fencing to discourage people from going across and creating erosion. I think that might be one of those little details that people need to consider, the people management aspect of, and how highly erodible this existing sandy steep hill is. Thank you.
We were absolutely remiss in not mentioning that. And it was something that is part of the reforestation plan, is to have things along the edges along with a mixture of railings. And our hope is sort of twofold. One as a people deterrent, and the other is hopefully to soak up some of the rainwater and runoff. And so you're absolutely correct. And we are planning on doing that. We want to make it, and we had a separate conversation with Andrea just the other day and said, we want to make it as next to impossible as we can, noting that somebody will find a workaround.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, you design and build the best you can, but that is a design feature that I know we've talked a lot about, and we're gonna do what we can there. So I see Jim has his hand up. Is it Maria? I don't know how to.
Ricker.
No, the next person. So I'm gonna go to Jim first,
Sorry.
because he's next to David on my screen, and then we'll go to you next. So go ahead, Jim.
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself. Jim, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Jim Ricker. I live at 68 Shore Drive. I've been there 45 years and have swum in the pond for 7 years. So I like much of what has been presented. I really appreciate from what I first heard and what I'm hearing tonight, and the response to things that residents and citizens in town have brought up. I really appreciate that. I do have some concerns. And most of them have to do with what happens after this is all done. As far as what's going on now, I just wonder if a cost analysis has been done comparing putting in the handicap spaces down by the pond and altering the landscape there versus putting a path in all the way down. You know, one of the concerns is what we just heard about people cutting corners, and are we creating more of a problem that currently exists? I also wonder how, if a railing is put in, that doesn't meet code, because it seems to me it'll be very similar to the ones that have been done by Delia's group down in the Cove that work very well and seem to be holding up beautifully, and why this would be different if we had a railing. And it looks like additional steps have already been poured and put in. So I'd like to know about that. Also, I've heard the Mass Architectural Board is not, it's not an absolute one way or the other. And to me, if you have quality handicap parking down by the pond, isn't that an advantage versus a disadvantage to what the rest of us would do? So I'd ask you to consider that. I'm more concerned going forward. The term park scares me a bit, and it's the connotations that go with park, like Kennedy Lake Park or Whalum Park. I mean, that's not going to be this. But then when I hear about boat rentals, storage for boats, reinstalling permanent bathrooms, which to me, where do you put the leaching fields for those? Or are you going to pump them every week? Those kinds of things are really a change in use in my mind. And I'm not sure, Andrea, what the board had in mind when the gift was given to the town, but some of these things are improvements to improve upon what is there and what has been in the past, and others are new things. And, you know, some point, I think we need to be clear what is going to be the use of this property, and are we going to continue to follow the excellent vision paper that was put together by White Pine Advisory Committee about 5 years ago, and has been a document that many people have been using. So that's one of my concerns, along with off-season use. How is that going to be monitored by the town? From what I can tell, there are probably 5 town departments that get involved in this property. And how is all that work coordinated? And then again, in the summer, I think a ranger program that would be responsible for all of the town properties on the pond, the reservation, conservation land, and the beach. And the last point I would ask is, would we consider making the beach a reservation instead of a park? So those are my questions and points. Thank you.
So Jim, I very much appreciate the comments. I think I would just, in sort of generally overlaying them, I would go back to Andrea's comments about change. And I think the way I view the project, and this is just my personal opinion, you can fulfill the mission of the advisory committee's, you can fulfill the advisory committee's vision and still make changes. I think one of the big things is there something between the parking access and the beach has to change. And that's part of the deal when the town accepted this donation. And so what we're trying to do is work through what is the change to the access from the parking lot to the beach that is least impactful to the natural environment and the slope, but also offers the greatest opportunity for access. And it's not just, I think we've already covered the ground of, it's not just about disability access, it's universal access. And so just having stairs isn't really going to hit that mark. And so I think while I said Andrew's comment, change is hard and things that are going to look different than you're used to them looking for. How many years did you say you've been swimming there?
A long time.
Long time. The idea that it's going to look different.
I don't want to tell you my age.
Yeah, the idea that it's going to look different, I think, is a challenge for people. But change has to come, and I think that was one of the reasons why change was needed, I guess is how I would say that. But the only thing I'll say is I didn't see anything in those plans that talked about a roller coaster or anything like that. I think people cherish it as a swimming hole, and I think that's really supposed to be the primary intended use for the future. So thank you for your comments. I hope in terms of the operations and maintenance stuff, the Ranger program will continue. We are working on that. This summer was a bad summer for that. That was my responsibility because we had put a hold because of the pandemic on some hirings, and that was my fault. But we are going to renew that next year. And the other thing I'd ask the community is, I'm new. Okay, I haven't even been here a year and a half, and the closing took place during my tenure so far. So that's how new this is. And so I think what I would ask is, give us a chance. And you see from our presence here that we are committed to doing this right, but give us a chance to sort some stuff out.
Okay, thank you.
Is that a fair ask? Is that a fair ask, Jim?
Yes, it absolutely is, sure.
All right, so is it Maya, Mara? I don't even know how to say that. You have to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please. You're still muted. I know we all look forward to the day where we don't have to hear that anymore. Wait, you're still on mute. Let me see if I can unmute you. Oh, then there's somebody else.
There you go.
All right.
You got me?
Yes.
We hear you.
Can you introduce? I keep butchering your name. Can you introduce yourself so I know how to say it?
You had it in one of those times you said it, so got it covered. I'm Maria Piasecki, and I live at 28 Shore Drive, and I'm an abutter to the beach. I've got a couple of comments.
I'm sorry, could you spell your last name for the record? Because
I'm sorry about that. I haven't figured out how to. Okay.
It's just, I just don't want to murder it in the minutes.
The last name is spelled Piasecki.
Thank you so much.
Okay. A couple of comments. If you could consider, besides just trees, adding bushes to the site. Currently there was a clethra, and there's a northern bayberry down that's been there forever. A really big one that's being I shouldn't say wiped out. That's being removed by putting in the path. And I would think it's a possible, maybe it'd be nice if you could relocate it. It's quite old and large, but think about adding the understory bushes that are native and are there already, and keeping that and adding to that. The second thing is for the trees, if you could, instead of the count of trees, do a caliper, like how many calipers is there now? And what are you replacing it with instead of number of trees? Also, it looks like you're specifying in your original plans a 2.5 inch, I think, caliber tree you're using. If you could maybe beef, I know it's going to add money, but it's still not, maybe at least a 3 inch. They have a better time of survival. And it's going to be tough to have them established on that slope. So you could think about maybe beefing that up a little bit. And then again, onto the parking. The last meeting, somebody noticed that you were adding spaces, parking spaces at the top. and 9 spaces where the little drainage field is. And I was wondering if it sounded like from the last meeting that they really weren't needed. And I'm wondering if it is kind of an odd kind of design, cutting in like that where you can, if maybe if that could be maybe in the second or third phase. Think about if those spaces are really needed, and then put them in if you need them. But it sounded like in the last meeting, those spaces were not really needed. You already have so much pavement there. It seemed like a shame adding more pavement if you weren't really going to be using that. And I think, oh, one more thing. If you could provide a rendering, not just a site plan looking down at it, it doesn't give a real spatial feel of the place. If you could, you know, you're standing in the water, well, maybe from the water, but still, what is this? What's the sense of place here? What does that pavilion look like? And you've got, when you're going up the walkway, you're using boulders as retaining wall. What does that look like? If you could maybe, some way, maybe from the top looking down or from the bottom, you know, on the side looking up, and give a sense of what are these structures and what is this hardscape that you're creating in the walls? What does that look like? So people have a better sense of what you're proposing. I think those are all my comments. Thank you.
Sure.
Stephen, maybe I could just quickly chime in on a couple of them. And thank you, very helpful. Clethra, Bayberry, awesome, you know, understory plantings. We'll take a look at that. I don't know specifically that we're removing a clump or two, but if we are, maybe we explore the opportunity to relocate as you suggest. And I think clearly we look at the opportunity to introduce meaningful native understory plantings as part of the reforestation effort. So I think that's really great. We can look into the overall caliper of the size of trees that are being removed. It's not insignificant. And I think one of the things you have to realize, if you're removing a 36-inch caliper tree and it's dead, it's still 36 inches. Oh. And it takes a lot of 3-inch trees to replace that 36-inch tree if you're talking about caliper for caliper. And also I appreciate your point on the upsizing of the 2.5-inch. You know, in a perfect world, when you plant a small tree, it tends to adapt a little bit easier than a larger tree, quite frankly. However, if we're looking for immediate impact, maybe there's some sort of middle ground where there's some 2.5-inch caliper, there's some 3, then maybe there's some 3.5-inch caliper. And I think we need a pretty aggressive maintenance part of the specification that goes along with the planting. So it's not a matter of planting the tree and walking away, Mr. or Ms. Contractor. You plant the tree and then you own the maintenance upkeep of that tree for some period of time. And I think that allows us to ensure better success ratio of the trees that would be planted. So a lot of very good comments, and thank you for that. Appreciate it.
All right, great. I think it's Joe Rogers, and I'm not sure. I think you've had your hand up for a while, so we'll go to you. And then Ara, you're next.
Hello, good evening, and thank you. I have a couple of thoughts. Initially, I had been concerned.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, can we have your address, please?
I beg your pardon. At 20 Tracy Street in Concord.
Thank you.
I guess my main thought is I want to recommend propose to the engineers to find a way to make use of the existing stairs and to not replace them with a new set of stairs further to the north. I certainly understand that the existing stairs are not compliant with any sort of regulation, but I really want to recommend that we should look for the sort of variances that would allow those to continue to be used rather than to dig them up and dispose of them and to do the disruption to all of the trees around it. Basically, to make use of the existing stairs, given that the very fine new handicap accessible ramp will be built. And I think that's going to be a very positive thing for everyone at the pond to have that walkway put in place. but to not replace the stairs with another walkway next to it. The stairs should have a handrail should be added to it, and maybe benches to rest along the way. But there has to be a way to continue to use those stairs. That's the main thought I'd like to propose.
I appreciate the comment, Joe. We'll certainly look at that. I need to manage expectations and say that if it's not code compliant and we are doing construction out there, we probably can't keep them for legal, for code compliance and liability reasons, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But we'll certainly make sure of that if there is an option that we examine it. But I just want to be honest and say I don't think that's possible. But I'll Gene, I don't know if you can weigh in on that.
Well, I think, you know, the code is pretty clear. It's pretty strict, and it's all in the interest of making that move up or down the stairs as safe and as predictable as possible. I know there was a lot of effort put into putting those stairs in place. But the fact is that the height of the stair, the width of the stair, it has to be consistent. And sometimes you're talking about folks that may have sight issues as well. And you have to have a very consistent, predictable cadence to a staircase down a hillside like that. So I appreciate the comment. Stephen, I think I'm in the same spot. And I've been part of many variance applications to MAB and other entities. And I'm just not optimistic that that would be possible in this case.
Thank you. One other thought, a minor thought possibly, but I do want to recommend the idea of moving the lifeguard shack from the side of the beach that it's on now over to the other side, which would free up quite a bit of space, usable space for other things in the sort of location where it is now. It seems like it could be a movable building, and it would be better if it were on the other side of the beach.
We can take a look at that for sure. I think the reason we had put it there, we hadn't determined that it was its permanent home, but it was certainly the easiest place for us to back it in. And we wanted to make sure that if we put it on the other side, that we weren't disturbing any of the natural, grass and borders that were there between that and the home next door. So, but certainly that would be up to Ryan Orr and his crew to take a look at.
So can I just share that it's not quite as easy as moving the shed. Yes, the shed is absolutely easily movable, but the power from the street comes down to a pole right there. We then trench that to the shed to give it the power we needed to charge, whether it's walkie-talkies or computers or whatever they need for recreation. That now has to be brought to the other side of the beach. So we would have to trench the entire beach to get the power to that location. So it can absolutely be done, but it's not quite as easy as just rolling it over there. So just wanted to share.
Try.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Ara, is it Ara?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. My name is Ara Avakian, and I live at 501 Powder Mill Road. It's the opposite side of the pond from the beach, but we've been members for most of the 44 years we've lived here, and I also swim around the pond during the summer, so I go by the beach a lot too. I would like to second some of Andrea's comments. It gives me a lot of confidence in this project to see the change from the previous presentation. The details that are shown in the graphic show that the people who've been working on this pay attention to the comments, and it gives me confidence to see that, and I have much more faith in the process. The other thing that gives me confidence is to see Delia Kay's face, and to hope that hi Delia, hope that she, without maybe burdening her more than what's already on her plate, if she can somehow be of assistance to the team that's working on this in advance of the presentation that will be made as part of the formal process to the Natural Resource Commission. Her expertise and commitment to the pond has been very effective. I was a member of the White Pond Advisory Committee for 2 different times over a period of 9 years and worked with Delia trying to improve the erosion. And the work that she led is outstanding. The stairs and the fencing and the improvements to the slope have done a great deal to mitigate the erosion, and I want to thank her for it. So that's it for my comments.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the comments. I know, I'm sure Delia does as well. All right. I'm not sure. I think it was, your name isn't spelled out, but you're J. Frankel.
Right. I'm Jerry Frankel. Sorry, don't have my name up there. That's my tag, but at any rate, Jerry Frankel, 132 Jenny Dugan Road. Briefly, I just want to also second Ara's comments and others. The plan is much improved. It's clear that the community's been listened to. I want to recognize that because I appreciate it very much. I've got several quick questions. As someone else commented, I noticed that there are several additional parking spaces planned at the top. And I'm wondering if there's been a particularly identified need for that. Over the years, I don't think I've ever seen the parking lot 100% full. So I'm curious about the particular motivation. Along with that, a related question is, and this is operational, is how is the town going to manage or planning to manage peak load on the beach? And how does the answer to that affect potentially the question of those extra parking spaces? So I'm curious about that.
Okay. Do you want those answered now, or are you going to keep going?
Sure.
Keep going.
You can answer them now, and then I'll get to my other 2 questions.
Sure. I don't know if Kate or Ryan or.
Yeah, so the parking spots that were in addition that were added and seen on the first iteration of the plan have since changed. And I apologize, we didn't necessarily address those directly. We did keep a couple of them. And mostly we were going to designate those as staff parking spots. The reason being is over the years, we've had, over these past 2 years, we've had a more robust staffing plan down there. And we've also included, swimming lessons, which I understand that the White Pond Associates did that as well. And so we were remiss in giving them a place to park. And we wanted to be able to have places where it's just designated for them to park, either coming or going, without taking away from the folks who are paying to have a beach pass and to use the property. As far as peak load, I'm going to go over to Ryan Kane on that one because he has more experience with the comings and goings there.
Sure, thank you. Is it Jim? Was that your
Jerry.
name, Jim? So Jim, when we first took over the property and we had the public hearing, some of the things that was outcry from members was concern over a number of parking spots. In reality, in the last 2 years, the number of parking spots hasn't been a major issue there. We've only operated the facility in normal times one summer. This summer was certainly very different, and parking was a non-issue this past summer. The peak load, I don't know the number, right? I knew this number much better 2 years ago. Now I don't have to really worry about that right now because of the way we're set up. But I don't remember the exact number we had for the peak load of number of people that would be allowed down at the facility. And that, it doesn't necessarily correlate to the number of parking spots. You are correct in those saying that, in the past 2 years, we haven't filled that parking lot on a regular basis. There's been a few times I've gone in there on some hot Saturdays and Sundays and seen the parking lot pretty close to full. But we didn't have times where we were turning people away due to parking. But when we first took over the facility, that was one of the major concerns brought to our attention when we had the public hearings. from both members and people of the community. So that's kind of along those lines. I can try to get you that. We'll try to, when we put out responses or follow up, I will try to get you the peak load that we had 2 summers ago as a capacity for the waterfront director. And then always the waterfront director has the ability to lower that number if she feels, he or she feels that things need to be lowered down for a safety matter. So.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the detailed response. Couple more quick questions. There was a reference to a decking area. What is the decking area, if I heard that correctly?
Yeah, that's an area. I wonder if we could share the plan. Brandon, maybe you could walk through that.
I'm sharing right now, but it is being uncooperative. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember there was actually that rogue plan, Kate, that was the lower.
Right there. Yeah, keep going.
This one?
Nope. Keep right before the stormwater.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes, there it is. Yeah. So when we talk about the decking area, it's really the decking that is going to be built to provide the accessibility to the seasonal restroom. As you can see in that one photo, the actual access to the restrooms are plus or minus 18 inches above, the wheelbase of the trailer. So we have to provide some sort of landing to provide access to those restrooms. And then it's traversing the grade. This is a wood deck on helical piles potentially to minimize impact to the ground, but an accessible route over to this lower pavilion, which is also wood decking itself. So this is essentially what we're calling the deck is this area in here, if you're able to see
Got
that.
it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also might be good to point out that where the existing bathhouses, there used to be 2 bathhouses that were there, male and female, and then one also had a lifeguard station. That's sort of the area that we're talking about. So we're not actually disturbing anything that wasn't already disturbed. Those bathroom or bathhouses have been taken down, and right now there's nothing in their place. And so this would sort of be this is a natural flat area that we tried to pick an area where we would do the least amount of impact.
Got it. Thanks. Next question. So I'm really pleased to see the attention on the stormwater issue and the upsizing, so to speak, of the infiltration system. This tackles directly the biggest issue we all have, which I think is water quality. So I think that's tremendous. But my question is, given that the upsize is roughly 25 times the existing capacity, have you looked at how much space that's going to take and how much you will need to dig up in the beach area to do that?
Yes, we have.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Great.
And as someone noted earlier, I am not a civil engineer, stormwater guy. I work very closely with him day in and day out. He wasn't able to attend the meeting this evening, so I was relaying that information earlier. But we do have very qualified stormwater engineers who have done this. So where you can see the gray shaded areas within the parking, and we did that very strategically to minimize impact to the trees, and particularly down at the bottom area. And then also there's a small area within the beach, below the beach, I should say, that would get us to that required capacity that we mentioned, the 13,000 cubic feet of storage.
And we did do test pits scattered around the property, and the soil characteristics actually do vary within the confines of the property. And the system is designed to encourage infiltration as well. And I think that's in response to a comment that was made a little bit earlier.
Great. Thank you. One last, really a point to make. Regards to the bathroom, It turns out, well, as you now recognize, the White Pond Beach is used all year round. The heaviest use is in the summer, but it's literally used all year round, especially by fishermen who come. And several years ago, the White Pond Advisory Committee produced a fairly extensive vision document. And if you're not familiar with it, I would encourage you to please check it out. But the reason I'm bringing it up is it identified particularly the need for year-round bathroom services. It's not just an issue of convenience. It is an issue, it affects water quality, affects sanitation. And so I recognize that we haven't had that in the past, but if you look at the overall usage year-round, there is a need. So I would respectfully request you take another look at that.
So just so you know, yeah, we did have that plan and we did see that. And again, we refer to this portion of the plan as phase 1. There may or may not be additional phases. There's none planned at this time. But when kind of speccing out what would need to happen, and that plan included having restrooms that then had a pump that pumped the waste up the hill, and then had a chamber there that then pumped it into a leaching field that was under the existing parking area. And so if you can imagine, that's extremely expensive, particularly because we would have to rip up most of the hillside, the roadway, and then redo the parking area. And so at this point, it's relatively cost prohibitive. Although when we first started this process a couple of years ago, we said we're going to install bathrooms and do ADA access. And it became very apparent once we took ownership of the property that really stormwater management was much more necessary than a permanent restroom facility at this time. And so the money would be better spent on both accessibility in the universal design way and stormwater. But we are very aware and, would like nothing more than to do that. But we're talking about probably adding, at least $1.5 million to be able to do that.
Jim, and when the town took over the operation, not that this is the ultimate answer, we did put a porta potty down available for the fishermen. We do have it available there year round. The challenge is it has to be at the top of the hill in the parking lot in the winter because they can't access it through the snow, which makes it probably much less effective, but we are providing at least the availability of the porta potty and that was one of the concerns we heard when we took over the ownership of the operation right away and tried the best we could to address it in that form.
If I can add to that, so if we decide we want to put in a bathroom that's going to be year round, we also have to add, additionally, we have to add heat to that bathroom. So that's going to be something that's now going to be a year-round maintenance. And then we're also going to have to provide surveillance because we don't have anyone there full time. So we'll have to have locks on timers. We'll have to have surveillance, and we'll have to check up on that. But so that's why for now I think the porta potties were a good answer to that that calling, if you want to call it that. Yeah, that's a bigger issue, I think, than what we're willing to take on at this point. But
I think setting aside the constructability, there are operational concerns, and most places like this don't have year-round bathrooms because of security concerns and everything else. But I think, like Kate said, if there's a time where we think in the future that it can be done, we certainly would be happy to do that. So I'm going to go Diane Reynolds. You've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, hi, that's me. Hi, Diane Reynolds, 42 Shore Drive. I'm right on the pond, and I just have a couple of questions. One, why do 7 trees need to be taken down for access to the bathroom?
Diane, if you want to, or Brandon, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure.
You want me to share the screen so you can go back to that?
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do, and there is surprisingly, there's still a lot of grade change at the lower level of the pond. So getting from the handicapped accessible parking spaces to the bathrooms and then to the beachfront requires installation of some ramps to enable that. And we showed that in the plan view that ramp, that decking, that ramp system, that's where those trees are actually located. So they're at their uppermost reaches of the beach, in the same general vicinity where Kate indicated that the old men's and women's rooms were being removed. It's a mix. There's a couple of pines, and actually they're mostly pines. But it's really to facilitate the move from the parking area that's shown on the left there, down to the beachfront, and installation of the walkways and ramps that are shown in that diagram.
Okay.
The condition of the trees is quite variable too, and I noted that at the beginning. One of the trees actually being removed in that vicinity is dead, and is a safety issue. The others are not dead, but they're tightly clumped together, and their canopy is actually relatively high, without a lot of lower branches. So.
Okay, thanks. And then the area where people are permitted to swim who have been given tickets to go there and swim is roped off. That roped off area seems to be getting bigger and bigger over the 5 years that I've been looking at it. So I'm wondering how you delineate where people are supposed to swim, and if indeed that roped up area is in the part of this park area that you're constructing, where are the potentially rented kayaks and boats that you brought up a little while ago? Where are they supposed to go? In this roped off area?
I'll speak to the roped off area, and being 2020, I think you're 100% accurate. We should probably have a better way of delineating that space, and whether GPS or whatever we're able to do. So we hope to be able to put some things in play with that. And we've operated the beach for 2 years, and those 2 years, Ann has thought that the beach has shrunk, the swimming area has shrunk. I'm only going off of, we brought Ann on purposely because she had the history for us. Ann is the waterfront director. I'm sorry, I should clarify that. And that was previously there with the White Pond Associates. So her take has been that it has shrunk. I've definitely had some neighbors come over and tell me that they thought it has gotten bigger, but I don't disagree that I think that we could certainly take measures to be able to do things with either GPS or something to be able to pinpoint, to make it more accurate. And so that as we hear issues or concerns from the community, we can either answer it accurately or be able to make adjustments that we know, as opposed to an eyeball test for that. So
with regard to the canoe and kayaks, we actually don't have any plans in the works. The context of that, just to make sure that everybody knows, is that those were some of the themes that came out of when we asked folks if there were other amenities that we weren't thinking about. And it very much speaks to either a future phase or some kind of programming effort that someone may want to have, but we have no intentions of doing that right now. And also, just as a public bathing beach, we are not allowed to have any boating, whether motorized or unmotorized, within the swimming area. And so if anybody was ever going to use any of that, rented, owned, or otherwise, it would have to be outside of where the swimming area is.
But they don't have the ability to do that. They don't have the ability to use the entire pond. If they buy a pass, they're supposed to be on the beach area within the prescribed beach area, and then in the water in the prescribed wet area. So
no, as a Great Pond of Massachusetts, persons are allowed to access the pond from any place on the shoreline if they're doing it for fishing and boating. And so it would be a service that the town could perhaps provide to persons, whether they have a permit to swim in the beach area or not.
That would be pretty horrible, right? If they can use, because already I have, and I'm happy to have people who fish off my property. They also pee on my property and leave their stuff on my property. And I certainly wouldn't want people boating off my property. I mean, it's private property, around
They're
there.
not allowed to, so as a Great Pond, again, they're not allowed to go onto your property, but anybody is allowed to access the pond from the shore And so everyone who lives there, and yourself, and I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with your exact property, but there's a portion of the shoreline that you in fact don't own, that people have access to by the very nature of the fact that it's a great pond of Massachusetts.
Okay, I'd like to put a nix on the boat and kayak rental in that case and discuss that more as time passes. And otherwise, I do very much appreciate the changes that you've made in this plan in order to respect the environment around the pond. And thank you.
All right, thank you. One of the Gaylises has their hand up. If you want to unmute and turn your video on, introduce yourself.
Hi. Let's see. This is Tanya, and Mark is here too. I'm going to make a very brief general comment. And Mark,
Do you want to turn your video? Do you want to turn your video on so we can see you?
All right. Well,
Tanya, I need to I know your street address, but could you please say it for the record?
Yep. Sure. It's 62 Prescott Road. Thank you. My general comment is about the replacement of mature trees with smaller trees, that in general that we should, as a town, in all our projects, keep in mind that mature trees are hard to replace. They have their own social connections. More and more is being found out about this, and that we just that in general, as a rule, we are careful about taking it for granted when we say a tree is being removed and replaced with smaller ones, even 3 or 4 smaller ones, that it's not the same thing. So that's my brief general comment, and Mark has a more specific comment.
Okay. Hello, Mark Aylis, 62 Prescott Road. I'll do our musical chairs here.
Has the music stopped yet?
Yes, I think. By the way, there's a Beethoven orgy on the WHRB, so we turned that off temporarily. So I appreciate very much this format which feels much more like a real public hearing. Seeing everybody here together feels really good. This is definitely a site that's worth careful consideration so that we do no harm and improve things and preserve the good things. I had a question. In terms of what is required, there's as Town Manager Stephen Crane mentioned, as you mentioned, if you're going to put something in, it has to meet code, et cetera, safety codes, et cetera. Town has liability and all that. So that's one consideration. But I'm just wondering if the public would not be well served if we could get some clarity on whether any of the requirements that this plan is held to are due to the selection of certain sources of funding, and also whether there is or is not a document of conditions that was part of the granting of this property to the town. And if so, is that available to the public, or is there not really any conditions there? I've heard different things. So I just have a question for clarity about what constraints we're working in. Thank you very much.
There are no, so I can speak to the gift. There were no order of conditions in the gift from the White Pond Associates, other than what is in the deed as far as conservation restrictions and the use of the property as a recreational facility. The deed specifies that it's considered a park, and I know that people were alarmed by that, but there's many different variations of park, and essentially what it was that it isn't a passive or entirely passive or conservation land. There's active recreation going on there, and so therefore it is considered a park. To go to your code compliance, so we, myself and the team have reached out both to the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board and received some information back on sort of what we need to do. The building code is really for the buildings and doesn't necessarily fit here, although there were the requirements, as Jean alluded to, of stairs having the same height and depth and uniformity are also in the access codes, but also in building codes. And so there's a number of things that will be coming forward, you know, as we go through the process, and you know, certain design standards that come out. But does that answer the question on, I'm not clear.
That answers.
There's many documents, you know.
That answers two parts of 3, and
Okay.
like with the stair pitch and everything, and this pacing, that's, you know, common sense that, you know, if it's kind of dark or someone can't see well, you want to know that the next stair is about where it is, etc. But the one question I was gonna, the third one was about whether there's any linkage between certain sources of funding considered and separate requirements or intersecting requirements.
Sure. So the only requirement, and it actually doesn't impact us right now, is if we were to accept certain types of grant funding, then we couldn't necessarily restrict access to the pond, or access to the beach rather, to residents only. And I'm not sure if you're remembering when we talked about that at special town meeting when we were accepting the gift. Someone had asked if we could have it to be restrictive to just Concord residents. And we had said that it would be difficult to do that from the jump, because depending on what we want to do with the property, we may want to avail ourselves of, you know, state and federal grants. And we didn't want to, you know, basically say that we were ineligible to be able to go for those because we're restricting it only to Concord residents. So far, we have not, you know, received or gotten any grants, and obviously the COVID has really had an impact on both the federal and state level grant funding. So it's a non-issue right now, but that would be the one thing that we would have to be very careful about.
Yes.
Because now it's what is set, what the warrant article says is what we do with meetings, with appropriations from town meeting.
Right. Yeah. So, but I just think it's important that the public understands that you turn the switch one way and you have certain conditions, you turn it the other way, you have other conditions, so that everybody knows the trade-offs. Thank you very much.
Okay, good, important distinction. Yep. Has anybody not spoken who wants to speak? So, okay, Wendy. You're muted. You still can't hear you. Okay, there you go.
Okay. I'm Wendy Slatabo. I live at 455 Powder Mill Road. My property is on the pond. I've lived on the pond for 50 years. I've been chairman of the White Pond Advisory back in the 90s. I was co-chair of Friends of White Pond. I just want to say how pleased I am, like Andrea said, and Ara said, and Jerry said, that you all, a lot of you newcomers, have really listened well to the concerns, and I'm glad you are. There's probably 200 years of people that are right in this meeting tonight that have lived and cared about the pond, who fought for the Sachem's Cove. And thank you. And it's also, I'm thrilled to have Delia here too. She's a very important person to have part of this. And Delia, thank you for so publicly thanking David Beard for his work of years and years and years for wastewater management. And Stephen, thank you for acknowledging that you're new to the pond and you're learning and you're listening. And I want you to come and see the pond from the view at my house. I'll invite you later. But thank you all.
It's a date. Thank you. Thank you I appreciate your comments. Anybody else? Jim, we want to see if anybody has not spoken yet. I can't see everybody. So if you haven't spoken and you'd like to offer comments, just unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Otherwise, I think there are a few who want to make repeat comments. Going once.
Hi, can you guys hear me? This is Beth.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I cannot get my video going, but I'm Beth Kelly. I live on 39 White Avenue. I'm on the pond. I just wanted to comment about a comment I think Ryan made and Ann Boudreau. We've lived here for 3 years and we certainly have a beach now and in front of our house. And I'm sure there's a bigger beach in front of the beach itself because the water height changes. And so Jean, you know, as one of the planners, I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but yeah, the beach does change depending on the water level. So I just wanted to mention that. It's a dynamic environment.
Thank you
Thank you
for that.
Great. Anybody else? All right, so Carmen, your hand is raised. Is that from the prior comment, or did you want to speak again?
To speak again?
Okay, go ahead.
It's just a word of caution about considering a leaching field for the bathrooms at the beach. We had an excellent presentation by Susan Rask, head of the health department. And no matter how well you keep up a septic or a leach field, because of our sandy soil and our steep sides, it always percolates down and will eventually go sideways into the water table. And I think that the trailers, the kinds of bathrooms that are pumped out will be very preferable in regard to the future quality of the water at the pond. We just got a report from Professor Kurt Stager, Paul Williams College. He did a chlorine sample on Walden a few years ago, and the same day came here and did a chlorine sample on White Pond. And his report emphasizes that Walden did some steps and the quality of their water has improved over the last 30 years, but White Ponds has been deteriorating and continues to deteriorate. And part of the problem of that is the mixed use of the land surrounding it. It has two sides of houses with septic systems. So it would be best not to burden that interaction of septic systems with the pond anymore with the bathrooms for the beach being with a leach field. The pumping out is really better for the pond's quality of water.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the comment. Thank you. Jeff Parker, did you want to speak again, or is that from earlier comments?
No, I want to speak. I just want to ask, again, thank you guys for all the work you're doing. And would it be possible to flag all the trees you want to cut so we can see what trees are we talking about, especially down toward the bottom, you know, on the side of the hill on the bottom there?
I would think, Delia, do we have to do that as a part of our NOI process?
You do for work within jurisdiction within 100 feet of the ponds, but I think maybe you've already, Kate, looked at that for the entire project site?
Yes.
Great. Yeah.
So we'll do that as maybe, I don't know when, but we'll do that as we get closer to the permitting process.
Some are actually, well, due to my knee, I haven't actually traversed that stairway, but some were marked from earlier this fall. Now, whether they've been removed or not, when we were trying to figure out if there was a way that we could meander the serpentine path in a way that, you know, we only kind of disturb the least amount possible. So maybe Ryan can go down there and take a look when some snow melts.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to see where they're going to be before the permitting process. Like now would be nice, so we know how we feel about the project going forward.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I think we'll try and get to it. Like I said, we have a blizzard that's starting now, but we'll do the best we can.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, so Jim, take us home.
I just have part 1B of my earlier question, so it's not like I'm speaking twice.
That's a loophole.
Yeah, I think the preventive measures in this project are super. I'm wondering if there's some money to also do some remediation work at the same time to try to prepare for hopefully further health preventing work, algae blooms. And there's some remediation work that's been recommended by ESS, who did some extensive work, I think, for natural resources. And it kind of coincides with a lot of ideas Bill Walker's had over the years. And if the money can be found from some of the savings in this project to fund some of those activities, to, I guess Bill described it as you kind of shock the pond back to a state of where it can recover. And I don't, shock is my word, but I'm not a scientist. Anyway, I think that would be
That's not a
great.
technical term.
The other thing about the swimming area, I think what's happened is it's probably the same square footage, but it goes out much deeper, and I think it's narrower than it was. And having had kids who were lifeguards there, it's getting out towards one of the 3 holes in the pond. There's a 55-foot hole that's surprisingly not real close to the shore, but there's a very steep drop off in that area. So how far out you want to go or should go? It's just a question for you. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, so if there's no other speakers,
I have a couple of quick comments. Hopefully they're quick, and some of them are quick questions. One is.
Wait, can you introduce yourself again, please?
Sure. It's Catherine Claremont, 26 Hemlock Street. One is, did you consider like a more of a permanent tight tank, like they would install in a house, in terms of the whole concept of this, large porta potty, thing that you have? Maybe that would kind of bridge, something that looks a little bit more permanent and has more of a permanent feel, but it still could be pumped. So
well, I think on the I kind of want to set the bathroom question aside, because I think what Kate has articulated is that the bathrooms have been displaced in the project by the water quality improvements, and so.
Well, I meant a tight tank with a bathroom. A tight tank would mean you pump it out.
No, I understand what you're saying, but right now the bathrooms are going to be, the bathroom function is going to be fulfilled seasonally by the trailer.
Okay.
And so as we look at
alternative to the 2 ideas, I wasn't sure if it was considered. The other one is another potentially quick question. Maybe I'll put them out and you can answer them. One is, where are the 2 endangered species of plants that were identified? The other one is, how wide is the ADA, universal design path? I don't know if it's like 3 feet, which I believe is the standard, or if it's going to be 4 feet or 5 feet. The last comment is, I understand people had issues with strollers. Anyone would on a steep hill. I would hope that you would circle back to the community and make sure that the community who expressed those concerns also felt like the solution was fitting, their need as well. So that was just a comment. The other 2 are questions. And I want to also say thank you. You are listening. That was important, was stated, and it's obvious. Thank you as well.
What'd she say? No, I'm teasing. Sorry, it's getting late. No, I think what I would say, Kath, is on the ramp thing. I'm going to push back on that a little bit, because we've covered that ground quite a bit. The pitch, the slope, the angle, all of that stuff is really designed by code. And so while we certainly want people to be comfortable with the design, people's comfort level is going to be, it's really the design standards we have to meet is going to drive.
No, I know the design standard is 3 feet. I was wondering if it was going to be wider.
But you also mentioned the sloping. I mean,
no, I didn't mention the slope. I just said the width.
Oh, okay. I must have misunderstood. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Gene, do you want to touch on that?
Well, 3 feet, Brandon, you can chime in after because you're muted, so I'm not. The pathway, it's not 3 feet. It's wider than 3 feet because it is a substantial length, as people have indicated. And it's got to allow for actually 2 wheelchairs to pass each other. So Brandon, you just gave me a high five.
Yeah,
so
it's 5 feet wide.
Which is a minimum width.
I can answer the question about the location of the invasives, but it really is a non-answer, which is that now that we have the stated acceptance that the project as proposed isn't going to adversely impact in their determination, we have to do a full botanical survey. And so that survey would point out where these are.
Great. Okay.
I thought you said they were endangered species, not invasives. I thought you said there were 2.
That's correct.
Endangered. That's right.
Which species were those?
They are.
There's the rasupenate bladderwort, and there's the
flat edge, Engelmann's flat edge, and yeah, rasupenate bladderwort.
They're great in the salad.
Maybe it's flat. I'm sorry, it's flat.
That's why they're rare.
Flat's Edge with an S. So,
Flat's Edge.
Flat's Edge.
Great. So if everyone has had, it feels like they've had a chance to speak. I'll be honest, this is 2.5 hours, just almost 2.5 hours. And to me, it's kind of flown by, which is usually the sign of a good discussion.
Best Wednesday ever.
So I guess I would just conclude by first thanking the team for really putting the work, I mean, a lot of work into preparing the presentation and working on the designs, and then thank you to all the participants for your comments, questions, concerns. Like I said, I think the comments that I am most pleased with was that you hear that we hear, and that we will continue to hear you. And so, you know, and I think you can see, you've mentioned Delia a couple of times. I think that the faces on the screens from the town, you know, we're here, we're committed to doing this the right way. And as long as everyone understands that there are certain choices the town has to make because we're the town versus a private entity, if we can kind of get over that threshold and understand that the choices we're making are driven by protections for all 18,000 Concord residents, not just the ones around the pond, then hopefully you can trust that we are going to do the best we can to be the next steward of this really cherished sacred space. So with that, I would wish everyone happy holidays and stay safe in the snow. Have a good
Does
evening.
the town team just want to stay on for one moment?
Sure.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.